Welcome to Exploring the Benefits of DIY Digital Interpretation. And you guys have made it to the last session of MCN, so I'm so glad you're here. Woo! We wanted to play into our punk ethos as well as kind of wake you up with some Fugazi Pandora Station, because I'm old and I don't actually have that music on my phone. My name is Adrienne Lalli Hills, and I am an interpretive planner at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Kansas City, and I love not spending money. And I love doing things myself. So I thought it'd be really fun to convene a panel of like-minded educators. And Jen, you are in marketing.
I am in marketing now. Name a department, I've been there.
She's been it, so she's all things. To talk about DIY digital interpretation and really celebrate a lot of the benefits of it. And so what we are going to be doing today is highlighting those benefits as well as some short case studies. Those are really just to prime you to think about things you've done in your own practice. So as we're talking, I've handed out some forms, and please fill those out. What those will do is, they're going to kind of contribute to a larger shared toolkit that we're going to share with everybody and the wider MCN community following this exhibition or this presentation. So I'm going to have everybody on the panel introduce themselves.
That's us. I'm Margaret Sternbergh. I am an independent interpretation specialist. I recently left the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and I'm going to be talking about a couple projects we did there with no money, no time, and no technical abilities.
I'm Jennifer Foley. I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement at the Albright Knox, which is a department that does cover interpretation as well. And I'm going to be talking about a project that I did because I did it with no staff, no money, and no technical expertise.
And I'm Jen Schmitt. I'm formerly of DeCordova Sculpture Park and Museum in Lincoln, Massachusetts, where I was the head of marketing, communications, and digital strategy. I'm going to be talking about building an app for being outside in 30-acre sculpture park to provide interpretation for an outdoor space that had very little.
I'm going to steal this. This works. Great. What?
There's a sound line that's going to need to go in for
hers, yeah.
Got it. Speaking of DIY. So just an outline, we have already gone through our introduction. We plan on not talking for more than 5 minutes each at you through some lightning presentations that'll highlight projects we've worked on. And then we want to use the rest of the time to break out into small groups and talk about experiences that we've had, because we're all in tech, and many of us are educators, and we've had experiences making stuff on the fly. And I think that that's such a valuable thing that we don't often share with each other. So each of the four of us will be facilitating little loci of people to talk, and we expect it to be pretty loose. If you have to leave early, please leave your completed form on your seat, and we'll pick it up after. Okay, so in some of our conversations we had kind of talked about like why DIY, and the answer we came back to was always, well, sometimes you don't have a choice. But we also really recognized a lot of the benefits. Constraints can really drive creativity. Sometimes doing things yourselves instead of relying on external partners or vendors builds internal capacity and familiarity with new technologies. If it is DIY, often it is lower stakes, and so iteration and experimentation is a little bit easier. And in my experience, it's often aligned more closely with experience goals, because if you are the educator or the interpretive planner and you're driving this ship, you get to be outcomes first, and that doesn't have to be an ongoing conversation with somebody who wants to maybe start platform first. In the same vein, you can often be more responsive to visitor needs. And then, in my experience, it kind of strengthens that team approach and disposition toward inquiry and trying new things. Okay, so I'll kick us off with just a really short thing called Faking It. This was a project done in support of an exhibition called Multitude Solitude, the photographs of Dave Heath. Our photo curators are wonderful, but they don't often realize that in addition to a catalog, they have to create exhibitions. So they were like, oh, what? You want to do some tech? We didn't budget for that. And even though I work for a large institution, our budgets are very siloed, and so you may have lots of funds one place, but it's very difficult to move it to an exhibition project. So it's kind of a wax and wane experience as an educator. So some of our constraints were we were incredibly short-staffed, we had zero budget, and our Wi-Fi in this particular space at this particular time was terrible. But the really great thing was we had amazing graphic designers. I had a license of Adobe Acrobat Pro and lots of Mountain Dew. So I had some time to burn because what I ended up doing was hacking a website. We didn't have time to build a digital interactive in HTML. So I realized with a already existent Kiosk Pro Enterprise app, which is an amazing resource, and I love it so much, I could load a PDF locally to the iPad, which we already had, and I could make a pretend website if I were only just patient enough. So lots and lots of time went into this experiment. So what I did is I asked my design colleagues to basically build a website in InDesign or like Photoshop, I don't even really know, and export it as a PDF to the same size as the iPad screen. I loaded it into Kiosk Pro, which made it behave and function just like a PDF. Not. Your screen's blank. Oh, I know. So it ended up looking like this. We created a linear flow with quote unquote buttons and opportunities to enlarge. But all of this is just a fancy PDF pretending to be a website. And the really cool thing about this is it never crashed. You may not get analytics, but who the hell cares if like the outcomes that you're looking for aren't really like numbers based. I did some unobtrusive observation to see if usability was a problem. It never was. People were able to navigate this pretty well, pretty linear and pretty straightforward. So we did it again. And we found that after some conversations with my graphics team, they're like, oh, well, we can now build this in InDesign and we can export it with the links, so you don't have to sit there with 3 cans of Diet Mountain Dew and make all these links by hand. I was like, oh, that would have been nice to know the first time. So we produced something even more complex in the same manner. This one was a little bit we had to map it out. And so it was a lot less linear and, again, behaved just like a website. We exported it as a PDF and put it on our website to see what would happen because our director likes things to be put online for reasons. And so we're still looking at analytics to see how many people actually downloaded it from the exhibition page on the website, but I'm dubious. And that is it. Short, sweet, super stable, and free.
That's what we like to. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about no budget media. And these are 2 projects that we did at the MFA Houston. The first is a do-it-yourself conservation video. And it was for this exhibition titled Pleasure and Piety, the Art of Joachim Uteval. And that is a terrifying name to pronounce. But that's how you do it. And it's centered around this image here and some background. I was new to the interpretation position. I was probably about a month into it when the curator and conservator came to me and said that they really wanted to offer an experience in the galleries where visitors could see some incredible research that the conservation team did into some images in the exhibition. We didn't have really a budget for this. We only had 4 weeks to produce it, but we had some amazing X-ray images, and really great colleagues that wanted to collaborate. And we also had a CREST interpretive fellow who had just started who could support the process. We also had PowerPoint. Magical. So the video really centers around these two images here. On your left is a version of the Annunciation of the Shepherds by Joachim Uteval, and that is at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And on your right is the MFAH's version, and they did a ton of investigative images of these two objects, including investigating why some of the paint wasn't stable on some of them. And here's an example. There's a infrared reflectography image and an X-ray. And we created this PowerPoint video by layering the images and text into a PowerPoint presentation. And what we did is, this took a really long time to do, and it took like 3 or 4 staff members. So that was one thing that we did need to dedicate some time to this and playing with it. And I think it's playing. Yeah, there it is. So basically what we did was create PowerPoint slides, layer on the text we wanted, and additional images where we wanted to highlight, where we wanted to fade in and out, and then you play the PowerPoint presentation and you record it, and it exports it as an MP4. I'd recommend for longer click-through or longer like text passages to like read them out loud as you're recording it before you click, because it's a more accurate way of how people will read it. We did a couple pilot tests and we were like whipping through those slides and no one could read it. The design on this is awful. I would totally do this differently, but we whipped it together pretty quickly and were able to put it in the galleries relatively quickly. And the next item I'm going to talk about is a faux audio guide for an exhibition that opened this past year by the artist Fazil Sheikh. He is this incredible photographer, and a lot of his photographs are paired with testimonies of his subjects that he either records by hand or they write to him. So it's an important interpretive element to include in the exhibition. And some of the testimonies were incredibly long and would never fit on a wall label and would really disrupt the aesthetics. So our curator came to us and wanted to create an audio tour for just a few stops. But we were in between audio tour distribution systems, so there's really no way to create an audio tour. And we had no budget. For an audio tour system, we did have a small budget to actually produce some audio tour stops. Again, really short notice. Some benefits was the artist actually came to the museum the day of the opening, or the week leading up to it, so we were able to record an interview with him to support this audio tour and actually have him read some of the testimonies. And he has this wonderful voice, and he is just a wonderful man. It was such a pleasure to get to know him. And our marketing staff was really, really helpful in figuring out a solution, and the solution happened to be YouTube. So what we did, and you're more than welcome to go to this on your phones, we set up a vanity URL, mfah.org/fsaudio, and we created videos where we layered the audio content over just a still image and then embedded that onto our website. And what happens, our website's mobily optimized, so when you pull this up on your phone, it actually looks very similar to maybe what an audio tour experience might look like on an audio guide that's mobile-based. And if you click on this video of this image, it'll just autoplay within the website. We tried using SoundCloud. The user experience didn't work. SoundCloud kicks you out to another website, and you can't really see the visuals. And we included the vanity URL on signage in the galleries and then also on the wall labels. The usage was not as high as I think we would have loved to have had. I think it's like 300 or 500 listens for each video. And if you compare to, I think, the 80,000 people that actually went through these exhibitions, it's incredibly small. But what's awesome is these were, they're now part of our permanent collection, or the museum's permanent collection. So now we have this content, and it's also online. So it's kind of creating something that we can use beyond that. And just a couple big takeaways we learned with creating this media ourselves was it created early and easy wins with curators. Interpretation was new to the museum, my position was new, and it was able to demonstrate that interpretation could be a solution to a lot of curatorial challenges, and that I was an ally, and I also could make things they wanted to have happen. And it took abstract things like, we want a conservation experience, and made a concrete way for everyone to start from, so that we could say, like, this is one thing that it could look like, and we could grow from that place. And it was really low risk and obviously low cost, so it didn't really take any political capital to make it happen.
The dongle doesn't work, so you're gonna have to hit me whenever I need.
Do you want us to switch seats?
No, it's okay. All right. So I'm going to be talking about a set of videos that I created for an exhibition that we had. And it's called One is the Loneliest Number because I was the only person working on this project. Yes. So at the time when this was going on, the department was particularly short-staffed. We actually had we do not have currently a standalone interpretation specialist or interpretive planner as part of the department structure. And I had 2 open program coordinator positions at the time. So we were very short-staffed, trying to cover lots of different things across the entire education department, across interpretation, across community engagement. This was a project for which there was a $0 budget. I did manage to beg just enough to get a book to help me figure out how to do something. And because we were short-staffed, I was also juggling a lot of projects at this time. But there was an opportunity that presented itself, and it felt like, all right, this is something that I really need to try to do in order to take advantage of working with a curator that I had not worked with previously, who was very open to the idea of having this kind of interpretive project happen in her exhibition. And it felt like letting that slide by would really be a missed opportunity. And so a lot of this project was just trying to figure out how to make something work in order to take advantage of that opportunity. The exhibition itself was called Menagerie. It was one of a series of exhibitions that were collections-based and were based on themes in art, or genres. So there was one on portraiture, there was one on landscapes, there was one on still life. This was the last in the series, and it was images of animals. So go to the next one. Because it was one that was based on images of animals, when we sat down to have the discussion about the interpretive plan, the curator said her primary audience was families with young children. And in a museum of modern and contemporary art, it is exceedingly rare to have anyone say, yes, our primary audience is families with young children. Yes, mostly because it's like, we have an exhibition that sticks on the floor. This is going to be great for families with young children. Like, it doesn't usually happen. So this is part of why this really felt like an opportunity. We were very committed as an institution to making that work with that primary audience. And so here you can see on the right is the installation of one of the pieces in the show, which is a Giacomo Balla piece of this very fast-moving little dachshund. And we actually made a plush toy that had a story that was written by the curator and illustrated by actually a friend of mine that went with the plush toy. So this is all part of trying to make the museum a welcoming space for families with young children. However, the way that this was going to get done to make this video was that I ended up spending a lot of time hanging out by myself at home. I mean, not entirely by myself because my cat was there to oversee my work on creating these videos. And the basic idea for the video is that I interviewed 3 very young children and asked them to tell me what they saw in works of art, and then edited the recordings down to about 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, and then illustrated them or brought them to life, animated them. And so then the first challenge was, well, how am I going to do that? So the very first one that I did was a Miro painting. You can see the Miro on the right, and I decided I'm actually going to do this old school, and I did it as an animation in which I drew the painting and then drew all of the animation using dry erase markers on a dry erase board. And so this is like in my office with this wackadoodle setup, and I'm in there for hours just like, I'm just going to draw a little over here, now I'm going to erase it, now I'm going to draw a little over here. So that was one of the videos, and I'll show a very short clip. It's not the whole video, but the next one is a clip, so if we can hit play.
Oh, I know what that is. It's a lightning outside because it's storming. She lives in a haunted house. That's scary in there. Maybe she's gonna go to the band. What's this? Oh. Must be a music. That's pretty.
That's good. So that was the first one that I did, and that's actually the very excited, amazingly, curator who was very excited about this project. That's actually her older daughter, who was 5 at the time. She was like, Luella can do this. And so I came over to their house. And, okay. But she was actually great. She had really fascinating things that she saw in this painting. The little thing on the right-hand side, the kind of black and red and yellow thing, she was like, that's a dog. And okay. But that I couldn't do that for everything because there was no way that I was going to be able to recreate this piece on my dry erase board. So I had to come up with a different way to do this, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I I had used Premiere before to do editing, which is how I was doing the editing actually on the first video. But I was like, how am I going to animate this? And a friend of mine was like, have you tried After Effects? And I was like, no, I haven't. So I was like, I'll just do that. So I took my entire budget and bought a book that to teach myself how to use After Effects. And it was definitely a little bit like deciding that I was going to fly a plane by getting a flight manual and picking it up halfway through the flight and trying to read it while operating the plane because there was this deadline that was coming, and there was no way around it. And so there was a lot of extra hours that went into this because there was a lot of I don't know how to do this, doing it wrong, having to do it over. But this one, I actually had 2 sisters, one who was 5 and one who was 2.5. Their entire discussion is actually hilarious because the 5-year-old says something and then the 2.5-year-old just repeats it, and this goes on for a while until finally the 5-year-old's like, stop copying me! So this one, I actually did, I'm gonna have another very short clip, I did with After Effects.
I think they're having a meeting. It's like they're having an election, except there's no tents, and it's not people. Yeah. If the leopard be the winner, then the lion's gonna track down the leopard. And if the lion becomes the winner, then the leopard is gonna run down the lion, so he can be the leader.
So the sound's a little off because the place where I had to record the audio was in this very echoey place, and so this was one of the sort of downsides of doing this was it was tough to get good sound. I think the other thing is that small children say really weird things and say them in really weird ways, and so sometimes it's really hard to figure out what they're saying, which is why in the first video you can see sometimes I put up the text on the screen because when you just listen to the audio you're like, wait, what? Because you look at the painting and she's like, I think it's lightning outside because it's snorming, and all right, and you're trying to go through, or I think she's carrying her suitcase. So you're trying to put this stuff on the screen. So trying to find that balance between recreating what they're saying on the screen and then just letting it happen. So I hope that you understood what she was saying. She thought it looked like a meeting and then it looked like an election. And I did this interview right around the time of the election. And so it was really interesting that she was like, if the leopard wins, he's gonna run down the lion. Okay. I know, it's just sort of, life imitating art. So anyway, that is the project. I'm going to pass it over to Jay.
Thanks. So, as I said, I worked at DeCordova Sculpture Park and Museum. We had 30 acres of sculpture park with approximately 60 contemporary art sculptures at any given time. And the most common question that we'd hear was, but what is it? And people didn't like not having an answer. So, next slide. So we have this large outdoor space. We don't have a staff outside to help people and answer their questions. It is, some of the sculpture is quite challenging, quite abstract, and and we had a very non-mobile friendly website. So there was no way people were going to use it to find the details about each piece on their phones from that website. But we had a lot of rich content. On our website, we had really great descriptions plus some interpretation of each piece. And then in our education department, we also had, for a lot of pieces, not everything, some audio tours that had been exclusively a dial-up tour outside in the park. And so there'd be 3 or 4 audio clips for most of the sculptures. So I guess I kind of went rogue. Nobody wanted to do this, and I thought it was a great idea. We had a paper map that the font was so small that you could not read it. We had tombstone labels that were, just the basic information, and they were on the ground, and if it was the winter and there was snowing, there was no way you could find them. And there's all this information that people want, and we didn't have a good way to deliver it. And reprinting maps is very expensive. So I went out and I found, at the time it was TourSphere, they've since been purchased by OnSell, and they had a demo. So I set up a demo, and in about 30 minutes I had this homepage. There's an easy back-end desktop interface to upload your content. So you can go to the next one. This is the second page where it created a sculpture park list. There's general museum information, what's on view, how to connect with us. So it offers a lot of options. Next one. And we started creating tours, self-guided tours. We offered tours of the park twice a week in the afternoon, and not everybody can be there at that time. So we'd create, next one, a list of highlights or family-based ones, or I have an hour, so what should I see? And we'd pinpoint, using the GPS map, where they were in the park. And then each pinpoint would become a link and go to, next one. It would be in this list, or one more. So then you'd land on the sculpture page, you'd have a picture, you'd have the label information, but then you could click and go further. And so, next one. You could have the full text from the website in your phone. And then one more. And then we had these audio files for the dial-up audio tour, but we were able to upload them to this mobile website as well. And so ultimately, this is how I funded it after the fact, was that we were already spending the same amount of money just for the audio tour platform. So by combining the audio tour with this mobile app, it was the same price. So we just shifted everything over to this platform. So next one. So things learned. People want to learn the way they want to learn. Not everybody wants a map, not everybody wants to use their phone, and that's okay. But we have to offer multiple venues or multiple avenues of getting to your information. The people who were willing to use their phones didn't care about Wi-Fi and data issues. They were going to use them one way or another. And I think people liked having, they show up to contemporary art, they're a little uncomfortable with it. They don't want to have to just go off and figure it out by themselves. They want to be told where to go, have a little structure, make sure they're doing it right, even if that's not the way we want them to enjoy it. So ultimately, not a huge number of people used it. We did a terrible job of telling people we had it, but 20% maybe in the summer used it, and in the winter, very few people were there anyway, so it was very low use. But I think it was a great experiment, and just to present it as something we should do without asking permission, basically. So that was our mobile web app.
Thank you, Jennifer. 20% pickup rate for free. That's pretty ridiculous. So what we're going to do now is we are going to divvy y'all up into 4 groups. So let's have people who are in the first 4 rows over there get together. The rest of y'all in the back glom together. And then if you guys on this side could just bisect and maybe turn into a couple groups. Grab your sheet that I handed out, because we're going to be getting into kind of a circle or circle-ish form, and just sharing out loud different experiences we've had so that you can probe each other for questions. Again, we're going to be taking all of your forms and transcribing them into a shared document, but it's always easier to talk to people in person. So we'll be spending the rest of our time doing that.